That's, to me, is interesting. There's something Shakespearean about all this, but it could turn out that Mark Carney, an interloper, really will walk away and be Prime Minister of Canada, even though he's never been elected to anything.
Wow, what a surprise. And that's the Toronto Star admitting that. Welcome back to another episode of Stand on Guard. I'm your host, David Crayden. When we come back, we're going to look at the Liberal leadership race, how corrupt it is, why it's a foregone conclusion Mark Carney will win, or Justin Trudeau will come back. The question of timing there. And we'll examine what Trump's threat to Colombia yesterday means for Canada. When we come back, more about all of this. We need political change, but we also need to resolve to resist. Yes, please like and subscribe to this broadcast. We've been doing so in larger numbers recently. I am so gratified for that. It means a lot to a small station like this that wants to be at least a little larger. Trying to give you all the news you need to know. Can't obviously do that every day. Still working with one show a day. Hope to do a couple of more throughout the week just to keep you updated. Thank you so much for subscribing. Like the show right now if you can, so we can beat the algorithm. You know, YouTube likes to go after shows to talk policy. And that's all I'm going to say about that. But share this broadcast with your friends and family. I'm sure they're going to like it. And so I'm fascinated by a couple of events recently. And the first, of course, is this very undemocratic move to expel Ottawa MP Chandra Arya out of the Liberal leadership contest. Why? They haven't even told him. They haven't even told him why he was expelled. And actually, did you know, he was the first guy in the race. He was the first guy before Mark Carney, before Chrystia Freeland, before Karina Gould, before Ruby Dalla. He was the first guy in the race. Are they going to kick anybody else out so Mark Carney can win that much more? And we know that there is a concerted attempt to get rid of this guy. Now, I feel badly because, as we'll get to in a minute, Shandra's got some fairly good policies. And I hope he crosses the floor. We could use another Ottawa MP in the Conservative ranks because it's top heavy right now with Liberals, the Ottawa area. Ironically, the leader of the Conservative Party has an Ottawa area seat. But it'd be nice to have another guy. So what does he say on his social media? I think this was actually on his Facebook. He says, "Today I was informed by the Liberal Party candidate that I will not be permitted to enter the leadership race." I might have the wrong race. I wouldn't put it past the Liberal Party. We have a prime minister who did blackface for decades and yet accuses everybody else of being racist. The Liberal Party can be as racist as any party. While I await their official communication, I am carefully considering my next steps. The decision raises significant questions about the legitimacy of the leadership race, and by extension, the legitimacy of the next Prime Minister of Canada. Yeah, it sure does. Right? And it took a Liberal to say this. What are you saying, Chandra, that this might be a corrupt race? Yes, it is. This charade, this facade of having a contest to elect the next Liberal leadership candidate, the next Liberal leadership guy who will automatically be the next prime minister. The next Liberal leader will be the next prime minister candidate. Yes, even if doesn't have a seat in the House of Commons. So there was a concerted attempt, of course, for people who are not usually Liberal to join the party, because it's pretty easy to vote in this Liberal leadership race. Very easy to join the Liberal Party, get your membership, and vote. So General Rick Hillier, fantastic Chief of Defense Staff, says, yeah, we need about 250,000 people to join the Liberal Party and vote for Chandra Arya as leader. Tamara Leach, my friend, convoy, Freedom Convoy personality, I'm not going to say organizer or leader, that's what they want you to say. She said, done. So there was a concerted effort out there amongst the grassroots of small c conservatives, small l libertarians, capital L Freedom Convoy supporters to do something about this and support Chandra. Sure. And that's, of course, why the Liberal Party got rid of him. Now, he admitted in an interview on CBC, which we can't show you because CBC automatically starts to force people to take their material down. He admitted that he was French. His French was not great. In fact, he said he didn't really speak French at all. But he didn't think that was a problem because supposedly we live in the democracy. Supposedly the Liberal Party is democratic. It always says it is. So, Mark Carney doesn't speak very good French either. In fact, he spoke in a few halting phrases when he had his leadership announcement in Edmonton, well, about 10 days ago now, maybe longer. He strategically placed a few French phrases to convince us that he could speak French, but he's admitted in the past his French is terrible. That's a big deal if you want to be the leader of the Liberal Party of Canada. Big deal. Now, Tracy Wilson writes this. Laugh out loud. The Liberal Party of Canada was never going to let it be anybody but Mark Carney, the elite Liberal insider. When everyone who stacked up behind Trudeau stacks up behind carnage, as he writes, it means they're the same. This is a farce. It's a coronation. Now, I love what this is. Why was Shandra disqualified? This is what was particularly offensive to the Liberal Party: running a small, more efficient government, eliminating DEI quotas, criminalizing the glorification and support to terrorists, extremism, and terrorist organizations. That's what Chandra Arya was advocating. Doesn't sound much like a liberal in this day and age. Sounds like a liberal maybe a century ago. But that's what he was advocating. Like I said, he should cross the floor to the Conservative Party of Canada. Or maybe even the People's Party. Oh, except they. But he should obviously consider his political future. And as Rowan here asks, or was this just plain racism? Well, I don't know. I can't make that judgment. I do know we have a prime minister who loves to accuse everybody else of being terrible racists and never wants to talk about his own problems in that regard. So anyway, I've got a couple of clips to show you here. Make sure we get this keyed up. Now, this is Industry Minister Champagne, who, if you watch Question Period, there's one of the most irritating moments is when Champagne gets to his feet and answers a question, whether he's speaking in English or French. He has one of the most grating, annoying voices in the House of Commons, in Canadian politics, probably in history. And he's always difficult to listen to. He's sort of the bookend of Chrystia Freeland. Chrystia Freeland talks very slowly and says things in two sentences, just like this. Champagne speaks very quickly and at a very high end of the register, and he's enough to make you turn Question Period off and never watch it again. But here he is explaining why he's supporting Mark Carney, despite the fact he worked with Chrystia Freeland for 9 years, almost, and he just turns his back on her. No, can't support Chrystia. But there's a secret deal going on here. It's a backroom deal between Carney and Champagne. And he admits it.
Why are you choosing to endorse Mr. Carney over her?
Well, I have a lot of respect for Chrystia, but I would say I've known Mark for a long time as well. And the reason, because, I was a contender. So for me, I decided to endorse a candidate which shared the same vision of Canada, an ambitious Canada, a confident Canada, a prosperous Canada. And I think this is going to be a mighty economic team because both of us together were very complementary. He brings his experience as a central banker, which we'll need. This is unprecedented time in the history of Canada. You've seen the recent news. You've seen the president's speech in Davos. On my side, I think that, I've been in cabinet for a number of years and with the business background, it's really an economic team that you're bringing where we can make sure we both know how to negotiate. We both have a relationship in Washington. We both know how to rebuild, I would say, the industry in Canada. This is almost like a CDR moment. CDR was the industry minister after the Second World War. And everything that I'm seeing now will require, it's like a wake-up call, basically, that to be more nimble. We need to get things done. And I think Mark and I are working together very closely. You'll see that.
And you would be?
And you would be?
You would.
Here's the revelation. The great reveal right here. What did Carney have to do to get his support? Well, there's been an agreement. And he's just like, what did he say? Say de how? I think he means CD how. But
be working together very closely?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Well, that's the essence of a partnership. Okay. This is more than an endorsement. This is a partnership. I was leading to be a contender myself. So
until just a few days ago, we thought
exactly.
You might be.
And you know what? We had support across the nation, volunteers, Canadians, colleagues, premiers. But now what we need to do is.
So they had a little backroom discussion, and Carney said, "Hey, Champagne, you can be on my team. We'll work together." And of course, the two have been seen all times together now. Champagne will jump on any bandwagon as long as somebody will give him a job. I can't believe anybody in the private sector ever hiring this man to do anything except maybe sweep the sidewalks.
Is now that we're teaming up together, we're stronger together. That's really what we came out of that and say how we can fight for Canada. This is unprecedented.
Or they're teaming up together so they can fight for Canada. Yes, it's always about fighting for Canada. Champagne has been fighting for anybody but himself in the Liberal hierarchy, in the hegemony of the Liberal Party for the last 9 years. But now he wants to fight for Canada with Mark Carney. Mark Carney, of course, hasn't been fighting for Canada for the last 9 years. He's been fighting for the United Nations. He's been fighting for the Bank of England.
I would say almost in Canadian history. So I think this is the right team at the right time to fight for Canadians and fight for workers. And you've seen it with Amazon. When you stand your ground, things happen.
I'm going to ask.
When you stand your ground, things happen. Well, what does Amazon have to do with this? That was a nice try, Monsieur Champagne. Very nice try. But Vassie here from CTV doesn't really budge.
About that in a second, because I have many more questions about it. But just on Mr. Carney and the message that he's trying to deliver with the help of yourself, for example. Look, he started talking a lot, in advance of the official declaration and when he launched his campaign about being an outsider. But since then, he's surrounded by people like you and other members of cabinet, much more of the Liberal establishment than any other candidate. How can he pitch to Canadians or even Liberals that he's an agent of change when the people who are responsible for the direction of the government that he is trying to change from are all supporting him?
Well, he's bringing a fresh look, and we're going to be complementary. A lot of colleagues have surrounded Mark and saying, we can do better together, and I think that's very powerful. In my case, it's not just the economic side, but I wanted to make sure that we would have a very strong voice for Quebec. For French, I insist.
Okay. So it's not just about Canada; it's about Quebec, and he wants a strong voice for Quebec. And you wait for this. You won't believe how he responds to questions about Carney's bilingualism.
You remember at the time that there would be a French debate, that the leader would speak both official language of Canada.
Are you okay with his French?
Oh, yeah.
Good enough?
Well, listen, he speaks French, and I'm sure over time this is going to improve.
Why are you choosing to endorse Mr.
Mark and saying, you know, we can do that the leader would speak both official language of Canada.
Are you okay with his French?
Oh yeah, I mean,
good
listen.
enough?
Well, listen, he speaks French, and I'm sure over time this is going to improve.
Hey, his French is lousy, but it could improve over time. We can't hold that against him. The Liberal Party's always held that against people. Always. You didn't have a hope in hell. And certainly in the last, shall we say, 60 years of becoming leader of the Liberal Party, unless you were fluently bilingual. But Mark Carney's an exception all of a sudden. It's okay for Mark Carney. No, Mark Carney doesn't have to speak French. And he'll learn on the job. He'll get it down at some point in the future. Not to worry about it. Just incredible how these people will lie and misrepresent and jettison their principles and their policies to stay in power. That's what it's all about, folks. It's about staying in power. And suddenly the Liberal Party is listening to Canadians. Suddenly the Liberal Party is equitable. Suddenly the Liberal Party is democratic, except they just kicked out one of their leadership candidates. But that's okay. Now, Stephen Guilbeault, Mr. Environmentalist and Climate Change, the Environment and Climate Change Minister. This is the guy who was arrested for scaling the CN Tower to make a statement for Greenpeace. This is the guy who wants to ban plastics in the grocery store to the point that where meat is unwrapped. This is the guy who wants to stop building roads in Canada because that might encourage people to drive their cars. Guilbeault, though, he's on side with Mark Carney now like nobody else. This is just astounding.
Start off on your endorsement of Mark Carney in the leadership race. Every single candidate is either backing off increasing the carbon tax, the consumer portion of it, or getting rid of it altogether, including your chosen candidate. Now, you sound, you sound like you'd be okay with that. All of a sudden yesterday I was listening to your comments, and I remember doing multiple interviews with you in which you told me that politicians who cave into pressure on the carbon tax don't care about climate change. How can you now be one of them?
I mean, what I've said, Vashi, is that the consumer component of our carbon pricing system is a good policy, and it's a policy that works. It is helping us reduce emissions. It is putting more money in people's pocket.
All right, so Guilbeault still espouses what he calls the consumer component of the carbon tax. In other words, screwing you at the pump every time you fill up your gas tank. Taking your money away every time you try to heat your home. He still thinks that's a great idea, but that doesn't matter because I'm prepared to say it's a bad idea now.
For the majority of Canadians where the federal system applies. But at the same time, I'm forced to recognize that largely due to Pierre Poilievre's campaign to frankly lie and...
Oh, it's because of Pierre Poilievre. Yeah, it was a good idea, but Pierre Poilievre ruined it for you. So now you have to renounce your carbon tax because Pierre Poilievre lied about it. These guys are incredible.
Misguided Canadians, it has become very unpopular. And what I've also said is that our climate plan doesn't rest on one single measure. There's about 100 measures that we've put out the door in the last few years that are helping us reduce our pollution like never before in the history of the country. In fact, we've never seen our pollution levels go down while the economy is going up. Never happened before. And I mean, of course, I would like for the consumer component of pricing to continue moving forward. But the reality is that it's not supported by the NDP. Even so, environmental organizations are telling me, listen, Minister, it's too unpopular. And we have other tools. Well, I mean, we obviously have the industrial component of carbon pricing, which gives us about 3 times more pollution reduction than the consumer one. So we have other tools.
He just can't seem to get the words out because it's hard when you're choking on your own rhetoric, like Guilbeault is doing here. He's admitting that the whole thing has been a farce, or I still believe in this, but I have to sacrifice my own beliefs because Mark Carney has to win. And I know it. He's the choice of the globalists.
Tools at our disposals to continue fighting climate change. And Mr. Carney's been very clear. He said, if we want to remove something from the equation in terms of fighting for climate change, we have to be able to put something else or use other tools that we have and beef them up to make sure that in the end, we're not losing ground on fighting climate change in Canada.
Yeah. So is any of this working? Now, I showed you yesterday, or the day before that, we talked about the ECOS poll that is completely outrageously wrong, saying the Liberals have climbed to within 7 percentage points of the Conservative Party of Canada. No, they haven't. But look at your X feed right now, and you will see all kinds of polls coming out of Ontario with the Liberals in the lead. This is all part of the action plan to convince you it's a new Liberal Party. It's time to vote Liberal again. Yeah, it's been 9 years of hell, but they changed. It's a different party. Now, this is interesting. Do you think it's working?
To be a two-person contest between the former Bank of Canada governor and former Bank of England governor and the former deputy prime minister, who really was the H.U. Brute of this psychodrama, because it was her letter quitting Trudeau's cabinet on the day of the fall economic statement that really was the straw that broke the camel's back. This has been something, Vashi, that we've all talked about for many, many months, well over a year. David's polls have tracked it, that Mr. Trudeau was sinking. But I think it finally took Chrystia Freeland, his second in command, for so long. And remember, he turned on her. Steph did a great story for the Globe about the backstory of what happened there. And I think that's, to me, is interesting. There's something Shakespearean about all this, but it could turn out that Mark Carney, an interloper, really will walk away and be Prime Minister of Canada, even though he's never been elected to anything.
So we just had a Toronto Star journalist call Mark Carney an interloper who's never been elected to anything, and he's just going to walk away with being Prime Minister. Now, does it get any worse than this? I don't know if it gets any worse than this, but I can tell you this. We are at the precipice of a serious economic catastrophe. While the Liberals play their games, while this continues to go on, and while ECOS pretends that the Liberals are actually climbing within reach of the Conservatives, and we know this is all nonsense. I'll show you this one again. Incredible. Liberals break 30 points. This is what ECOS is trying to tell you. And this, of course, it's not working for most people. They know the Liberals are not within striking distance of becoming government. If there's any justice in the world today. But the problem remains, while the Liberals have their little leadership dance, their ball, and while we can continue to not have the House of Commons sitting and Parliament continues to be prorogued, Donald Trump is insistent on this 25% tariff coming to pass on February 1st. Justin Trudeau continues to just thumb his nose at at Donald Trump, continues to pretend it's Donald Trump's problem. There's nothing we can do in Canada except threaten to give full retaliatory tariffs in return, which of course will do nothing. But there's a lesson yesterday from Colombia, and I want to emphasize this. Donald Trump sent back a bunch of criminals to Colombia, illegal aliens who were in the United States illegally. He sent them back as phase one of his deportation plan. Phase one is the criminals, the national security threats, the most dangerous. They're getting shipped back on military aircraft. That military aircraft was denied access to Colombia yesterday by its president. Donald Trump said, no way. You either let that plane land or you're going to get a 25% tariff immediately and another 25% tariff in another week. Suddenly, things changed very quickly. And there's a lesson here for Canada. I'll get in that in a second.
With breaking news, a Trump retaliation narrowly avoided after holding the threat of massive tariffs and sanctions over the head of Colombia's president. An agreement has now been reached. Any flights carrying undocumented immigrants from the U.S. back to Colombia, which were previously blocked, must now be met with unrestricted acceptance. ABC 10 News reporter Danny Miskell spoke with a national security expert about why the Colombian president felt the need to cave.
The threat has been lifted. On Sunday, President Trump announced he was going to impose a 25% tariff on all Colombian goods, even doubling that in a week. Colombian President Gustavo Petros tried blocking 2 repatriation flights carrying undocumented immigrants from entering the country, claiming those on board were not being treated humanely.
The tariffs that would affect Colombia greatly because they've got $15 to $16 billion worth of trade every year with the United States, and most of that's in coffee and petroleum and cut flowers.
This is Ron B., an expert on national security and international relations. He says President Trump's move to impose tariffs was his way of playing hardball. But the game isn't over yet. According to the White House press secretary, these sanctions will be held in reserve and not signed unless Colombia fails to honor this agreement. Ron says the U.S. already has economic leverage over Colombia, holding a $3.6 billion surplus on Colombian goods. So Ron says President Trump's message to Colombia with these tariffs was clear.
You need us more than we need you.
In a social media post, President Trump also warned he would enforce a travel ban, visa sanctions, harsher inspections on Colombian cargo, and more.
This also signals how serious he is about making sure that those that have come to our country that are creating crimes go back to their country of origin.
Well, this is the first time that the Trump administration has had to retaliate against a country for refusing repatriation flights. Do you think President Trump is trying to set a precedent here on the international stage?
Yes, I think it is, and he's also set the precedent with Mexico and Canada. As you remember, he threatened a 25% tariff on everything that they make that comes into this country because of not dealing with the border and the fentanyl coming across the border.
The press secretary also says the visa sanctions and enhanced inspections from Customs and Border Protection will remain in effect until the first plane load of Colombian deportees is successfully returned. Danny Miskell, ABC 10 News.
So what's the lesson for Canada? Well, I think it's pretty obvious. Canada continues to refuse to fix its border. I've gone over how Trudeau's border plan is a farce. It's $1.3 billion over 6 years, with most of the money being spent in the 4th, 5th, and 6th year. Virtually nothing in the first 2 years. Virtually nothing. In fact, next fiscal year, they're going to spend more money to confiscate your guns than they are to fix the border. So Trudeau has failed to fix the border. Donald Trump knows this. There is no border security plan, even though Doug Ford, the Ontario Premier, has said it's a wonderful plan. I've seen the plan. It's great. Yeah, we've all seen the plan. It's in the fall economic update. I've showed it to you for the last 3 days. 6 years of spending. It is an absolute abdication of responsibility. Doug Ford must have enough sense left in his head to realize that. But he's so much in the bag for Justin Trudeau and the Liberals that he's prepared to ignore that. Now, Pierre Poilievre needs to get out there and say, this border plan is a farce. This border plan is a fraud. It's not worth the paper it's printed on. We need a real border plan, and I'm the person to do that. Poilievre is continuing to say, yeah, we released a border plan. It's not great. I would do better. It's not just not great. It's not just that he could do better. It's that Trudeau's doing nothing because Trudeau wants a border fight. He wants the border to have lack of security. He wants a trade war with the United States because that's the only hope the Liberals have of defeating the Conservatives in this next election. Trudeau wants to frame the next federal election as us versus them, meaning us as the Canada led by the Liberals, Canada as interpreted by the Liberals versus America led by Donald Trump. He wants to frame the election in those stark terms. And he wants Pierre Poilievre either to be co-opted into this strategic design or to be alienated and demonized as a traitor, just like he's done, Mr. Trudeau has done to Alberta Premier Daniel Smith. Excuse me. And that's the plan here. If you can't see that, you're not looking at it. But I'm sure all of you can understand what's going on here. This is a huge, corrupt leadership race. And if Mark Carney isn't elected as the next Liberal leader, Justin Trudeau will be drafted back as leader to lead the party in the next election, which they will frame as Liberal Canada versus Trump America, and forget the opposition in this country. That's what Justin Trudeau is all about. That's what he's trying to do with this. It is dangerous because it's putting our sovereignty at risk and it's putting our entire economy at risk. Donald Trump is serious, but as he demonstrated with Colombia, just do it and the tariff disappears. Fix the border and the tariff will disappear. Stop trying to con me with a fake border security plan that is useless. And that is precisely what Trudeau is doing. And Trudeau doesn't care if Trump buys this or not. Trudeau doesn't care if Trump is prepared to look the other way because he wants that border fight. He wants that tariff fight. He wants that battle with Donald Trump because it helps him and it helps the Liberal Party. Can't say this enough because that's what's going on. And if Mark Carney inherits the Liberal Party and inherits the Prime Ministership of Canada, that's what he will run on as well. Because this, my friends, is a completely corrupt government that is being led by a completely corrupt party and completely corrupt leadership candidates and Prime Minister. So that's where we stand today with this. I'll be back in a second with a few more parting words. Please have a look at our store. So I encourage you, do what you can. Email Pierre Poilievre's office, say you support what he's doing as part of the Canada First strategy, that he's not being co-opted, that he's not joining Team Trudeau, that he's fighting for Canada first. I encourage you to encourage him and to encourage Conservative MPs who are doing that. Because the alternative is to watch this whole thing collapse as Trudeau, the Liberal Party, the Liberal government, and Liberal leadership candidates just stand there and watch it happen because they don't give a damn. It's all about their personal power. Thanks for watching today. I'll be back again tomorrow with all the news you need to know, and let's continue to resolve to resist.